What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have an exciting video for you. We have our Vetra Blazer here and our Eride Pro SR. We're gonna do a top trumps category list here with 15 different categories that we're gonna rank the bikes over each one and talk about it. Now you guys may notice both of these bikes have some upgrades and modifications on them. Right now for this test, we're gonna act like they are completely stock, but then later in the video, we'll talk about what mods we have on these bikes so that if you guys purchase one, you can better decide what mods you might wanna do. Let's dive into category number one. Our first category is gonna be price. This is a huge one. If you guys are shopping for a bike, the Eride Pro SR comes in at $5,700. This price was recently lowered. It used to be almost $6,300, but now $5,700. The Vetra Blazer comes in at $5,250. That is a difference of $450, so we're gonna give the point to the Vetra Blazer. Next category is top speed. This is a huge one that everybody wants to know. The Vetra Blazer, we have GPS verified and tested the top speed at 64 miles an hour without any changes to the tuning of the bike. The Eride Pro SR, the fastest we have ever GPS tested is 72 miles an hour. That's a pretty big difference. That's 8 miles an hour. Now, you can go into the app, the Far Driver app on the Vetra, and you can increase its top speed with some custom tuning, but not everybody wants to do that, and we haven't been able to see a top speed as fast as the SR after we've tuned it, so we are going to give the point to the SR in this case. Our next category is build quality. We are going to immediately give this a draw. So both of these bikes are going to get a point. Eride has been around a lot longer as a company. However, Vetra, I think the build quality is just as good as the Eride. And I can't necessarily say that either one is better than the other, so we're just gonna call it a draw here. I think their quality is good on both. I think there are other brands that do have higher quality builds, such as Surron and Talaria. I think they still just knock these out just a little bit, but these are not bad build quality, and we're just gonna call it a draw. Our next category is power. The Eride Pro SR has a whopping 25 kilowatts and a ton of torque. The Vetra Blazer has 20 kilowatts and a lot of torque, but let's talk about that torque. I think the SR has more. Obviously it has more power, but also when you ride this bike, you can really feel the low end grunt of the torque compared to the Vetra Blazer. That doesn't mean that this bike is slow. 20 kilowatts is still absolutely amazing, and it still does have plenty of torque to climb any steep hills that you want, but we are gonna give the point to the Eride SR. Our next category is suspension. Let's start off with the Vetra Blazer. So we have KKE suspension front and back, and this isn't the bottom tier of KKE. You've probably heard of them before. This is some fairly high-end stuff on here, and I think it feels fantastic. Has a lot of adjustability. You've got preload and compression that you can change on each leg. I think it has a very nice feeling to it. It doesn't feel extremely dead or too quick to react. I think it just feels nice. The rear shock, I think, is very well balanced with the front. The bike doesn't feel like it's too soft in the rear or too stiff in the rear. It just feels nicely balanced. Let's move on over to the SR. This is an aftermarket fork on the front, but pretend it is the stock Fastace fork. We also have a Fastace rear shock. I think this suspension is very similar to the Vetra Blazer. Completely different company. I think they feel quite similar. However, I think maybe the SR might feel a little heavy for the suspension that's on it, where I think the Vetra, like that weight does play into it a little bit. It feels a little more nimble, a little more agile, but I would say the both suspension are both on par with each other. So we're actually gonna call this category a tie and give a point to both bikes. Next category is battery size and range. This is obviously a huge one. We're gonna start off with the Eride SR. We have a 72 volt, 50 amp hour battery, which is no slouch. That's a big battery for this size of bike. However, the Vetra Blazer has a 72 volt, 55 amp hour battery, so it is larger, but it's not that much larger. But here's the deal. We have done range tests on both of these bikes. When we do these range tests, we go out to a flat stretch of road about 7 miles long, and we go back and forth, holding a constant speed until the bike dies. We do eco mode and we do sport mode. Those speeds are 28 miles an hour in eco mode and 50 miles an hour in sport mode. Obviously, both these bikes go faster than 50, but to be consistent with all the bikes that we test, those are the speeds that we have chosen. So let's get to the numbers. The Eride Pro SR, in eco mode, it did 59 miles, and then in sport mode, it did 29 miles. That's really good range. But the freaking Vetra Blazer did 82 miles in eco mode at the same exact speed and 45 miles in sport mode. That is just absolutely incredible. It blew our minds I'm just gonna put our range test chart up on screen here so you guys can compare these bikes to all the other bikes that we've tested. Over 20 models we've done this test on, but the Vetra Blazer is easily getting this point for a larger battery and way more range. Our next category is gonna be aftermarket upgraded parts availability. This is kind of a weird category, but a lot of people wanna know, is there a big aftermarket support for each of these model bikes? Let's start with the Vetra Blazer. We have some upgrades on this bike. We'll go more in depth on that later in the video, but there is just, because this bike is brand new to the market, there's not a whole lot you can do to it. And that's not necessarily a huge deal breaker for a lot of people because the bike is already so good out of the box, but the SR does have more options. It's been around for about a year now. There's a lot more different things that you can do and customize on your bike. So if upgrading is a huge part of your ownership experience with an e-moto, the SR is gonna have a lot more options available for you. However, I think the Vetra is going to continue to have its arsenal of upgraded parts availability coming out in the near future. Speaking of upgraded parts, if you guys are in the market for some upgrades, check out our website, tbelectricmoto.com. We really appreciate you guys' support. We have 2 discount codes for you, TB Electric and Talaria Boys. Try those out, save yourself some money. Let's continue with the video. Our next category is Headlight. This is, in my opinion, a clear winner going towards the Eride Pro SR, so it is gonna get the point. Both of these bikes have an aftermarket light on them right now, so we'll put some overlays on what the stock headlights actually look like. This one is just brighter, wider beam, more of a floodlight, just works way better in my opinion. It is just on or off. The Vetra Blazer does have a 3-position switch where you can do high beam and low beam, but the light performance just isn't anywhere as good as the SR is if you're actually trying to ride at night or off-road at night. Our next category is charging speed. This is an important one because no one wants their bike to take forever to charge. We're gonna start off with the Eride SR. This charges at 10 amps, which means that this 50 amp hour battery takes 5 hours to charge from being completely dead. That's not a bad charge time. That's pretty fast. It's not as fast as some other bikes on the market, but it's not bad nonetheless. The Vetra Blazer is a little bit different. This bike comes with a 10 amp charger, and so with the battery being 55 amp hours, it should take a half an hour longer than that, but it's charging at the same speed. However, that hasn't been the case for us. We have tested a couple different Vetras and none of the bikes have actually charged at 10 amps. You can connect to the battery BMS and you can see how many amps are being put into the bike at any given time. And for us, it's been about like 6 amps. Sometimes it's down to 4 amps, sometimes it's up to 7 amps, but really it averages at about 6. And so this bike, when it's completely dead, is taking upwards of 9 to 10 hours to charge completely, nearly double the time of the SR. And so that's a big deal for a lot of people, myself included. Charging speed, it's a big one. We're giving the point to the SR easily. Our next category is gonna be a big one. We've got displays, buttons, ride modes, things like that up on the handlebar. We're gonna start with the Vetra Blazer. So we have our main center display right here. We have some buttons on the left. This is to change our drive mode. We've got neutral, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we can also hold our M here to go into some different settings within the menu. On the right side here, we have an on and off switch. This is to turn on and off the brake regen. We're gonna talk about that in the next section. Next button down is our headlight switch. We have off, high, and low. And we also have reverse and our horn switch built onto the right side there. Within our center display, it does give us a lot of parameters. We have our instant power that we're being pulled in kilowatts. We have our controller temperature and our motor temperature. We also have our total odometer in miles. We have our trip miles. This is how far you've rode until you turn the bike off. We got our speed, our state of charge and percentage, and our riding time. It also has our ready mode, all that kind of stuff. And there is more that you can customize within this display in the menus. Let's check out the SR. Over here, we have our center display as well. It's still a nice large display and a lot of people love this. On the right side, we have our park button on the throttle. So you have to hit this to put the bike into drive. On that same thing for your front trigger hand, for your front trigger hand. And then on the other side, we have our headlight button on and off, no high or low beam, just on or off. On the left side, we have a individual reverse button. We also have our mode button where we can turn the bike from eco, sport, and race. So 3 different modes versus 4 on the Vetra. Then we also have off throttle regen, which we'll talk about in our next category. That is a switch right here. And we also have a regen brake lever, which we'll talk about in our next category. So this is kind of a tough one because a lot of this one comes down to personal preference. Which display do you think looks better? Which buttons do you think are more important? Both these bikes have reverse, both have headlight switches. This one has a park button. This one you just put into a mode and go. Starts in neutral, so it's kind of like the same thing as a park button. Both of them have different regen settings, so we're just going to give this a draw because it really is personal preference which is better, and I think both of these bikes have really a fantastic user interface and beat a lot of the competition. Going along with our last category, we got to talk about regen braking, and we wanted to break this into its own because it's an important one. So on the Vetra Blazer, we have a couple options. We have this on and off switch that I mentioned before. When you turn this on, it actually uses the sensors within your brakes to apply regen engine braking when you pull your brake levers. Now this is not variable, meaning that if you pull your brakes extra hard, it's not going to add more braking. It's just on or off like a switch. Now if you turn it off, then your brakes just act like normal brakes. There's no engine braking. Now in my opinion, riding this, it does work well and it adds a lot of engine braking, and it's great for riding on the street, but I don't like it for off-road. I think the switch just kind of being on or off when you pull your brakes, no matter how hard you pull them, it's just too inconsistent for trying to modulate when you're on dirt. Let's go over to the Eride Pro SR. So the SR has a variable regen lever. Now this is a lever that you push with your thumb. The harder you push it, the further you push it, the more regen braking it adds. You can also totally customize the amount of regen braking that your switch will max out at within the Eride Pro app, and it's really easy to do. Now this might seem cumbersome for some of you guys of having to use another thing to actually brake. However, this is how almost all of the aftermarket upgraded controllers operate on any e-moto for engine braking, and we love it. I am so used to doing it that when I ride a bike that doesn't have that lever, my thumb doesn't know what to do with itself. It's so used to using it whenever it can to add extra braking, and so in my opinion, this just works better, it's more customizable, and it's way more consistent to where I can actually use it off-road, unlike the Vetra. I did forget to mention that the Vetra, you can go into the Far Driver app, the app that is built for this controller, and you can change the amount of regen that it adds, but it's still an on and off switch, and a lot of people aren't going to want to get into that app because it is really a complex app, whereas the Eride Pro app is super simple to change any parameters that you want. It is actually an Eride Pro app, not an app that's just kind of off the shelf for the controller that's on this bike. So in my opinion, I would rather have the regen braking of the SR, but we are going to give both of these bikes a draw because they both have, at the end of the day, powerful regen that you can learn to use the way you want it to. Another small but important category that I briefly just talked about is the apps that both of these bikes have. The Eride SR has an app built by Eride, is incredibly intuitive, simple, and you can change everything you really need to change in a very easy way. The Vetra app is not actually made by Vetra. It is a Far Driver app, which is the kind of software, firmware that this controller runs, and it is not near as intuitive as the Eride Pro app. You almost feel like you need an engineering degree to actually get in here and understand what to change and what you're changing, how it affects the bike. So we're gonna give the point easily to the SR because a lot of people want an app, they wanna be able to change stuff, but you also want to know that when you're changing something, you're not going to screw up your bike. Our next category is weight. Let's start off with the Eride Pro SR. We weighed this on our hanging scale when it was completely stock at 181 pounds. The Vetra Blazer, we also weighed when it was stock on the same scale at 165 pounds. So we are going to give the point to the Vetra Blazer. Now, some of you guys might be thinking a lighter bike isn't always better and shouldn't necessarily deserve a clear point. However, when we ride these bikes, the Vetra just feels more agile, more nimble, and in my opinion, better. And so that's why it's getting the point. The Eride SR isn't necessarily a bad weight, but in my opinion, this is the clear winner. Our next category is going to be braking performance. Both of these bikes have very similar brake styles and performance and size of caliper on them. They also have the same size brake rotors. And so in my opinion, they actually feel almost identical power-wise when you're riding them. So with that, we're going to give both of these bikes a point and call it a draw. However, I would rather own the Eride Pro SR brakes, and here's why. They have more lever adjustability, so you can make them feel a little bit more how you want them to feel. Everybody's gonna have a different opinion on how they want their lever to feel, and I think the SR has more adjustability. The other big thing for me is that the brake pads on the SR, even though the calipers look almost identical to each other, there is more room in that caliper for thicker brake pads with more material on them, and they come with more material, and so your brake pads last longer, you don't have to change them out as often, and there's also more upgraded aftermarket brake pads available for these brakes, which if you put those pads in, the performance will actually get better on these brakes compared to the Vetra. So we're gonna give them a draw because the performance feels the same out of the box, but I would rather have the SR's brakes. The next category is handling. While both of these bikes are a very similar size, they do ride a little bit differently. So this is a personal preference. As someone who has spent over 500 miles on each of these bikes, I am giving the point to the Vetra Blazer. So let me explain why. The Vetra, being 15 pounds lighter, makes a big difference for me. It still feels incredibly well built, tight, there's not rattles, the battery's not shaking. And a big thing for me also is that the front end feels the right height. This fork is actually longer and taller than the stock SR fork is, so the front end feels like it's the proper height, and the suspension travel front and back just feels really nice and well balanced. So I think this bike just feels a little more nimble, a little bit more fun, playful, agile, stuff like that. Let's talk about the SR. As I mentioned, in my opinion, the front end feels a little bit low. We talk about this in our initial review of the bike, and later on, that's a huge reason why we put this aftermarket upgraded fork on, is for better fork performance, but also because we could add a drop crown and increase the height of the front of the bike, which really improves the handling, in my opinion, between these two models. So with that, we're giving the point to the Vetra Blazer. That is the end of our categories. And as you guys can see, the Eride SR is the winner. But you guys might be wondering, which bike would I rather have? Which one would I choose to purchase? Obviously, the Vetra is a little bit less expensive. The SR is a little bit more expensive. That's something I gotta keep in mind. This is a really hard choice for me because there are certain things that I like more about each bike. But I think at the end of the day, at this point right now, I would actually pick the Vetra Blazer. It didn't win as many points, but some of the categories that it won are a big deal to me personally, and they might not be as big of a deal to you, but stuff like the range. This bike, although the battery is only a little bit bigger, it goes so much further, and that's a huge difference. I love to just get out and ride huge, epic, long rides. I also think that it feels incredibly well balanced with the weight being lighter and the ergonomics feeling really good with the higher front end. I think this bike just feels a little bit more playful, a little bit more fun to ride, and that's what we're all after, right? Is having fun when you ride. I think this bike is a little bit more fun. And so with that, I would pick the Vetra Blazer, but it is a very, very close second to the SR, and it's a tough one because SR is faster. I like the Regen, I like the Headlight. There are certain things that I do like more about it, but at the end of the day, those are big things that make me pick the Vetra. Now let's go over the upgrades that we have done on each bike, because that actually brings them closer to each other when you start changing stuff for the better. Let's talk about the Blazer really quick. Upgrades we have done: Gigago front headlight. This is a huge difference. It's so bright, 6 different modes. Also, any of these parts you can find at our website, tbelectricmoto.com. We have discount codes in the video description. The other things we did was a Warp 9 direct mount stem that raises up the handlebars. We did a Warp 9 3-inch rise handlebar that also makes the handlebar taller instead of about a 1.5 or a 2-inch stock bar. I'm a really tall guy, so I like a tall handlebar. You might not need it as tall as I have it. We also added a Dunlop MX34 70 by 100 by 19 front tire. This is a much more aggressive off-road style tire, and that makes a big difference for the kind of riding I like to do. However, I think the stock tires are fantastic on this bike for all kinds of riding. They're a real dual sport tire option. The other mods that we have done is added a 16-inch rear wheel to the back of this bike. It comes with an 18, which I think works great still, but you can get a 16 with a huge E-moto tire on there, and that again improves the handling for the kind of off-road riding that I like to do. But if I did a lot of street and dual sport riding, I would just leave the wheels as stock, leave the tires as stock, and I think it was great. We also did some ODI Rogue grips. These are my favorite go-to grip. I think that is everything that we have done to this bike, and I think it's pretty well setup. There's nothing I'm like itching or dying to do on this. I'm really happy with where it sits right now. The Eride Pro SR, we have some similar mods, in being we have the same headlight, Gigago GIO2. We have the Warp 9 3-inch rise handlebar. We do not have a Warp 9 direct mount stem because the Eride SR stem is actually the same height. It's a kind of a hybrid of a standard stem and a direct mount stem, and we couldn't get any taller if we added a new direct mount stem. So we're excited to just leave that. We did do a Warp 9 stem lock to hold all of our bearings together. This bike doesn't need that, so we didn't add it because it has a threaded fork. We added a EXT ferro fork. This is a huge mod. It's an expensive mod. It's about $1,600. So it's a big deal to add a fork that's that expensive, but it did really change this bike for the better. The fork feels a lot nicer and it raised the front end up to kind of fix the geometry. We added some ASV breakaway brake levers to the brakes. So these, if you crash, they fold out of the way. We added some eMoto X foot pegs. I think the stock SR foot pegs are fantastic. They have a nice big platform, but the eMoto X ones are even better. They have more screws on them for more grip and stuff like that. We added a TB Electric adjustable kickstand so we can mess around with the height of the kickstand. I think that is it. That's all we've added. Oh, one more thing. We added a full Project 9 Designs turn signal and brake light kit to this bike. So if you guys can see, we have flashing turn signals on the front. You guys can see those flashing, and we also have it built into the rear tail light. We also have a flashing brake light, so when I pull this brake, the rear tail light actually flashes. That's an epic thing that you can add to a ton of eMoto models, so I gotta shout it out here. It's a huge one. We're super excited to be able to have those on a ton of our bikes now. We have how-to videos on how to install all of those on our other YouTube channel called TB Electric. I gotta throw that out there because I know a ton of you guys are looking for turn signal and brake light kits for your eMoto. So that's exciting. I think that's all the mods we have done. This bike is currently on stock tires still. This one has the upgraded tires, and they're both beasts of a bike at the end of the day, and I don't think you can go wrong with either one. But hopefully you guys found this video helpful and informative. We really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. Please hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed it or if you found it helpful. We'll catch you next video. See ya.